Nick Wallenda, the high-wire artist who walked across the Grand Canyon with no tether on a tightrope, and millions of viewers around the world watched, is going to be our very special guest as we talk to him about what he went through. And some of you feel like that's what you're doing right now. You're out in the middle of the tightrope of life and you feel like there's no net. But the good news is God is always there to catch you. And God has a plan and God has a purpose. And we're going to learn that from Nick.
You know, it's hard for people to understand what I feel up there because it's hard to relate to, but my family has been performing since the 1780s. We've been performing for 7 generations now, came over to America in 1928, but performing on high wires for that long. I started walking a wire at the age of 2, believe it or not, just a couple feet off the ground. At the age of 4, I could walk on my own, and the age of 13, it was my first performance. So I spent a lifetime on a wire. So it is somewhat of a comfort zone for me, and as you saw, I praise the name of Jesus, and I call on the name of Jesus for that peace that passes all understanding whenever I'm performing.
Do you ever think that God would use you with the gift that you have?
You know, I always knew I was called to the ministry. I gave my life to Christ at the age of 4. And I knew that I was called to the ministry, but I didn't know in what regard, in what sense. And I always thought, how are you going to use a wire walker to bring glory to your name? God had always, since a child, the first time I ever visited Niagara Falls, I was about 4 or 5 years old. My parents were performing north in Buffalo, and I remember looking across the falls at that young age saying, wow, it'd be awesome to put a wire up and walk through one side to the other. There were many, many roadblocks, many times where I heard no. And I kept going back to my prayer closet and going, God, I really feel like you've given me this desire to walk across Niagara Falls. No one in the world had ever done it. And I believe it's a platform that can be used to bring you glory, but I don't know how yet. And I continue to pursue permission to do that. And I hope this encourages all of you. No matter what, those desires that God has put in your heart, don't give up on those desires because you see a roadblock. God put those desires in your heart for a reason. Well, I ended up getting permission through about 2 years of a lot of governmental sources, and finally got 2 laws changed, and I ended up walking across Niagara Falls. 13 million people were watching as I gave praise to the name of Jesus. And I've received thousands and thousands of letters from that walk, and then of course this newer one, of people that were touched by that because they said it was real. There was no way to fake what you're doing. That's sincere, and I want to know that God that you serve.
I think people are sick of hearing sermons. They want to see a sermon lived out. And what you've been doing is really living out a sermon. And there's so many analogies to walking the high wire in the Christian life.
There really are. You know, I always use, my favorite analogy is when I walked across Niagara Falls. There was, churning water below me, and there was storms to my left and right. And through all of that, I was always trying to focus on that other side. I wasn't looking at the storms around me, and I think our walk in life is that way. We always have storms in our life, but it's all about focusing on God. When I can look back, I realize how that has molded me into the person that I am today. I can't imagine living life without Him. You know, I have so many imperfections. You know, Romans 3:23 says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and we're all sinners. You know, the name above all names, Jesus. It is a place where I find my comfort and my peace. You know, without Jesus, we wouldn't have any hope. But with Jesus, we have all the hope. We have an eternal destiny.